Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about nonlinear game design. This is something I've been doing ever since Fallout. So these ideas date back to 1994, but I see more and more games doing things like this these days, and I love it because this is my favorite kind of game. Now, what I mean by a nonlinear game design is how do you make a world and the instances within it that are nonlinear, meaning the player can choose the order they want to visit them in. Now, for me and my games, this comes with the extra difficulty mode of I always want to let the player make any kind of a character they wanted. I really don't like RPGs that force you to play a particular character. I my attitude is you make the story, I make the character. If you're going to make both, then maybe I'll just go watch a movie. But I want your story, though, to react to my character. And that's where the fun comes in. That's what RPGs are all about. So, in an open world, you can go anywhere you want. But just because you can go there doesn't mean you should go there. And the designer doesn't need to support you going there. So that means they can throw in all kinds of difficult encounters to discourage you from going to an area. Those could be random encounters, like I mentioned in the Fallout random encounter video. Those could be random encounters that discourage you from even getting close to the area you're trying to go to. As you approach, say, this mountain and you start encountering really awful, hard creatures, whole groups of creatures, traps and stuff, you may just go, I'm not going to go there. Or you may get there and discover that that location is swarming with creatures that are too hard for you to fight and so high level they spot you if you try to sneak and you don't have any chance of talking to them. There could even be traps that do way too much damage for you to resist or are way beyond your ability to disarm. There could also be environments that require climbing or swimming. And when you fail, you take damage. And it's hurting you far too much for you to continue. So it's okay then to have these areas. Oh, you could also put in, once you get to the area, there may not be anything attacking you or harming you, but it just may need be that when you get there, you discover that you need much higher skill levels than you have. There may be a computer that needs to be hacked or a door with a lock on it, and it's way too high level for you to pick. Or there may be a guard, and the only way he's behind glass, so you can only talk to him through a speaker, and the speech skill you need is way beyond what you have. I think this is fine. This lets players know, oh, this is a place I can come back to. I view that as aspirational. I don't view that as demotivational, especially if the game makes it really obvious, especially if it's not always combat and damage that's discouraging them from going there. There's another thing you can do. You can prevent players from even going to some places, and your game can still be nonlinear. One thing we did in Outer Worlds was you were not a pilot, so your ship flew the AI in your ship flew it around. It could only land at a landing pad that it had an authorizational. I think we called them keys. I forget what we called them, but unless you had that landing pad authorization key, you could not land there. It wouldn't even show up on your map, which meant you could go on the fast travel map and you could see Monarch. You could see the entire planet of Monarch. You knew it was there, but there was no place you could go to on it because there was no place your ship was authorized to land. So that itself is aspirational because you know that location is there, but you can't get there. Or you can go to a place, but you can have a door that instead of being picked needs a particular key or key card, or the computer that needs a path that can't be hacked and needs a particular password. Then if there's an NPC that won't give it to you until you're on their quest, and they won't give you the quest either until you're a certain level or you have a skill that's high enough, basically you can prove to them that you're good for this. That's another way of locking something up that the player can't get to, but they know they can come back. And that's aspirational. So now let's go to the next part of making nonlinear worlds, which is branching storylines. And this is a difficult thing. We worked through it on Fallout. We were far more branching on Arcanum, with far more story points. This is probably one of the hardest things to teach incoming narrative designers who haven't played a lot of games like this. It's also one of the reasons why we've had difficulty getting people from who are book writers or movie script writers because they think linearly and you have to literally break them of that. So what I tried to do, and this is an old thing I developed, I call it the football model of stories because it looks like between every two main quests, and I'll talk about quests later, but main quests are just all the quests you have to do along the story, the main story. Consider all the different ways you can solve each main quest, and you get a bunch of lines that go out and come back because they all go through the next point, which is that quest is resolved. So you can view it as a bunch of footballs that are interconnected. I view each point along that series of footballs as these are the same story checkpoints, but because you solve them differently, you arrive at each story checkpoint with a completely different context from other players. So let me give you an example. Let's say one of the main story points that everybody has to go through is there's a town that's being raided by bandits, and you've been asked to resolve this. So you've played any of my games, it's probably already popping into your head. I know a lot of the solutions. You could kill the bandits. You could kill the townspeople and say, hey, bandits, free town. You could kill both sides. We call this the Eric DeMilt solution because that's what Eric DeMilt, the producer I've worked with, tends to do. He's like, kill everybody. Problem solved. You could also convince the bandits to stop. You could either convince them there's an easier town to go raid, which isn't very nice. You could intimidate them and go, look, this town is under my protection. If you continue to raid this, I will kill all of you. Maybe that solution is only possible after you've killed a few of them, or maybe you have to kill the leader and then the rest of them go away. No matter what you have to do, the bandits stop or leave. You also might be able to convince the bandits to join the town. In other words, you don't have to fight. This town has had a population decrease for some reason, and there's empty homes. Or maybe there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. There's a factory that needs workers, or there's farms that need workers, or maybe the bandits are just getting tired, or they want to settle down, or they want to get married, or something. You can convince them to join the town. Here's the point of all this. So the end result is the player has resolved this quest. They can also still go back and visit the town. And the resolution they had can determine who, if anybody, still appears in the town. What NPCs are there? Maybe it's a ghost town. Maybe the original townspeople are still there. Maybe the bandits are there. Maybe they're both there. And the cool thing is, all you really have to do to support this is to have different greetings or initial dialogues with the player from the townspeople that are still there. Maybe the shopkeeper's like, oh, I love that the bandits are here. They buy a lot of stuff. Or the factory supervisor's like, they're good workers. Or maybe the police chief is like, oh, I hate them. They get drunk every night and they're rowdy. Or maybe you killed all the townspeople and told the bandits to move in, and they're just all hanging out, not doing anything, getting drunk on all the porches. It doesn't matter. It's basically you can control the level. Designers can control spawn points, and the narrative designers can write short, to the point, obvious dialogues to support the different endings you have. And they don't have to be novels. Just do that, move on. And you're only doing this for the main quest, remember. So now let's talk about what I mean by main quests. I often call these critical path quests. These are all the quests that have to be completed by the player to finish the game. They are required. They are not optional in any way. Because of my difficulty mode I mentioned, where the player can make any kind of character they want, these also have to be completable by any player character, no matter what their skill set, what class they picked, whatever different kind of characters you let people make, they have to be completable by any player character. Now on Fallout, we considered 3 ways of getting through any main quest. There was fighting, And that's always the case. You can just kill people. Kill them, boom, you've gone through. Notice that this often means you have to have quests that work with killing people. If you were supposed to rescue someone, you have to figure out how to kill the kidnappers without the kidnappee being killed, or else that quest will fail. If you are supposed to learn something and you kill everybody, there better be a computer or a journal or a scrap of paper somewhere with that information on it. The second way, the talking way, the dialogue solution, most people think of that as you walk up, you say something, it's done. Maybe. You could have a persuasion. You basically convince somebody, of something. You convince like, hey, don't do this. Let me through, whatever. You could also make the talking solution bribes. So you're going to have to come up with the money. Or maybe it's an item they want. So you're off on another quest. And it could be a side quest because it's optional. You could lie to them and just say, hey, I belong here. I work here. I'm going to walk right in. Maybe you have to show evidence of anything you're saying. So if you're trying to lie and say you work here, rather than just go, okay, your lying's really high, walk right in. They're like, okay, show me your pass. Now you better come up with a good pass. Maybe there's a way to forge it. Maybe there is a way to steal it off of a guard somewhere else who's maybe sleeping in a barrack. Maybe there's a way to pick the lock on a desk and steal an ID or a pass from there. Boom. That's kind of a quasi stealth followed by talking way, which gets me in the stealth way. There's a lot of ways. That's our third way of going through. So there's dialogue, talking, and now stealth. There's a lot of ways that you can do stealth path. Most people think it's, I sneak by them. That's one way. You can find alternate ways through that require a lot of climbing and crouching and going through vents or staying behind things that block line of sight. You can steal a key off someone and use that to go through some side door, some door nobody's looking at. You can hack a computer either to unlock a door or to set off an alarm somewhere so everybody moves off in that direction and now you're free to go through. There's lots of ways to do stealth paths. Now, on starting with Fallout, we realized because we want all of these paths to be doable by any kind of character you want to make, what we did is every main quest had to be doable in all three of those ways. So we had to come up with at least one way of solving it that was fighting, talking, and stealth. And we always made one of those easier. And by easier, I mean easier relative to the level you were supposed to do it. So if we thought this was a mid-tier quest story, we would set, maybe the lock was set to something that was a little lower than what we expected, just in case you came there and you were a generalist and you spread all your points out and you're having difficulty finding them and you can't make the speech check. Okay, turns out the lock is easy to pick, or there's a sleeping guard somewhere who has a key on him and he's easy to pickpocket. Because those main quests have to be solvable. Now, it's always okay to say you have to come back. You tried to do this quest and you couldn't do it, so you're going to go away, get some more levels, spend those points, come back and do it. That's okay too. Now, taken together, the critical path quests should form a complete story for your game. And by complete story, I mean it should resolve all the major questions. It's okay to leave some mystery, but it should solve all the major questions that have been brought up while you were playing, and it should resolve most of the storylines. Like I said, it's okay to leave some mystery, but it's frustrating if the player doesn't learn most of what they're after. So now let's talk about side quests. So by definition, side quests are any quest that can be skipped and the game can still be completed. If you think a main story quest is skippable, it is not a main story quest. It is a side quest. This means there can have to be some restrictions on side quests. There can never be a required item, an NPC that has to be talked to. None of those can appear on a side quest because the player may skip them. They may not do them. Note then that this means we can relax that restriction. These side quests don't have to be completable by any player character. It's fine if a side quest only supports one or two of those ways through. Like maybe this one can only be, you just have to fight them. When you encounter a rad scorpion in the desert, it's a side quest. You're not going to be able to talk to it. You're not going to be able to maybe sneak past it. Just fight it. If you want to support all three, that's great. If you want to support all three and there isn't an easy one, great. This is a side quest. The player can always run away and it will not prevent him from finishing the game. Now, I will say they should know what it is they're failing at. If they just walk up to a blank wall and they have no idea, was I supposed to climb it? Was there a secret door there? Was there a lock I was supposed to pick? That's frustrating. Always let the player know, this is why you're failing at this quest. Come back. So taken together, side quests answer either questions that weren't important for the main story, or they resolve all the non-main storylines. So maybe someone was murdered in the hub in Fallout. It's not important for the main storyline, but you feel like, doing that quest. They should probably find out who the murderer is. Just let it be closed down. So all of your quests, main and side, should support your design pillars, whatever they are. So if one of your pillars, for example, is that all playthroughs are equally challenging, don't put some super overpowered gun in halfway through that makes ranged combat characters super easy for the rest of the game. Because that makes the game feel, first of all, unbalanced. But it feels like the hand of the designer saying, yeah, you should have taken energy guns, or you should have taken ranged weapons as a skill. Also, if you have a design pillar that all of the playthroughs should be about the same length, so let's say you're going for 20 hours, 40 hours, whatever for your playthrough, you need to make sure that none of those ways of playing through the main quests have shortcuts. If there's a really easy way to kill everyone, like you walk in and press a button and a bomb kills everybody, that's going to make the fighting way too fast. If most of your speech solutions are just walking up to someone, having a speech check, and them going, okay, go in and get the item, that's bad. That's why I talked about a lot of speech checks either need you to have evidence or you need to bribe them, and it's a lot of money, so you may need to go come up with that money. And it's okay to either have the money right then, which means you did a lot of stuff to get that money, or you have to go get the money. Either way, time was devoted to something before you can just go through that speech check. So I think that's important. Now, you may not have those design pillars, but you should have design pillars. Before you start a game, you should have design pillars. Maybe I need to do a video on design pillars. But just make sure that all of your quests are supporting them. Even if it's a side quest, even if it's a minuscule side quest with only one solution, it should not contradict any of your design pillars. So now let's talk about how to end the game. I'm talking about all the ways it ends. I'm not just talking about narrative endings. I'm talking about encounters and quests and everything. Probably the biggest way I see open world games fail is they had multiple solutions all the way through, and then at the very end, they basically throw a boss creature that requires extensive combat skills. I've seen this so many times. It frustrates me because the player may be playing the whole game going, I'm a good talking guy. I've made so many people happy. I'm going to go into here and talk my way through this, and then everybody will have everything they want. And then they go in, and it's some bad guy with 8 tentacles and a bunch of guns, and you basically just have to fight him. It's why the master, that's an important encounter at the end of Fallout. But you can sneak your way through that area and explode the whole base with a nuclear bomb, and you never even have to talk to the master. You never even have to enter in the same room with him. And if you're doing the speech one, you can do it, but you need the evidence from Vree back at the Brotherhood of Steel. She will send you out on quests where you studied super mutants. So now she's the one who figured out, hey, these guys are sterile. If you've done those side quests and you have that evidence and you talk to the master, not just going guns blazing, you can have a speech solution there. And this is where I said the speech solution shortens the encounter with the master, but you had to do all these things before you could have that speech solution. And then to wrap up the storyline, I think the end slides should wrap up all of the main and as many of the side quests as you want. If there were undiscovered side quests, there can't be an undiscovered main quest, or they wouldn't have done it and they wouldn't be here at the end game. But if there are undiscovered side quests, you can, depending on what you want and what kind of side quests there are, you can either not mention them at all, or there can be some kind of, well, you never went to Farmville, and those people were having a drought, and unbeknownst to you, because you never went there, they all died. You could put something like that in and make the player go, I'm going to play again, and I'm going to go to Farmville. Or you can just not mention it. Have them something they can discover on the next playthrough. You also always want the end slides and the story wrap-up to make the player consider playing again. They should, maybe the ending isn't satisfying for them. Maybe, something comes up and they're like, well, maybe I shouldn't have killed everybody in that town, or maybe I shouldn't have sided with this faction, or maybe I should have spent a little more time working through this area because they see something as an end slide that they didn't like. And I think that's great. It's aspirational if you're clear what the player did or didn't do that led to that end slide. And I see end slides as the narrative story wrap up. And some people call it a reward as well. It is rewarding, but I view that as the narrative designers are in charge of the end slides, which is why they should have been keeping track of major player choices throughout the game so they can make those end slides. And I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. I think if you follow a lot of these guidelines, you can make a very fun and rewarding and player aspirational non-linear open world.